If you think your childhood was difficult, try to imagine growing up without a father, with a stepfather who made a point of reminding me every day that I was nothing. And to make matters worse, being ridiculed at school as if I had no right to exist. For years I felt invisible. I wanted to scream for help, but my voice never seemed loud enough. My name is Lucy, and this is the story of how I survived what seemed unbearable. For a long time, I thought my fate was sealed, that I would never escape the cycle of pain that surrounded me. But I was wrong. Today, I am living proof that life can change. And if you are here listening to me, I want you to know that you are not alone. Before I begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. This will help me a lot. Also, comment on where you are watching the video from. I am curious to know how far my life story can go. I grew up in a simple house where the only thing that was never lacking was my father's love. He was my safe haven, my hero. No matter how difficult the day was, he always arrived with a smile and an affection for me and my mother. I loved to sit on his lap while he told us bedtime stories. My mother laughed and said that I was Daddy's shadow. I wanted to be like him, strong, kind, and always willing to help others, but life doesn't ask if we are prepared to lose the ones we love the most. That day is etched in my mind like a tattoo that will never fade. I remember the smell of the coffee my mother made, the sound of the radio so turned on at low volume, and my father's laughter. I was drawing in the living room when I heard a different noise. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a bang, it was something more subtle but equally frightening, a deep sigh followed by a silence that had never happened in that house before. When I looked back, I saw my father holding his chest, trying to say something. My eyes met his, and for a moment I saw fear. I had never seen my father afraid before. My mother ran to him. I stood paralyzed. The next few minutes were a blur. My mother calling for help, the arrival of the neighbors, the sirens. I remember holding his hand on the living room floor as if somehow that could stop what was happening. He squeezed my fingers lightly as if he wanted to tell me something, but I never found out what it was. He never came home. My father's death didn't just take him away, it also took my mother's shine. She was never the same. The woman who used to sing while washing the dishes now spent hours staring into space. She tried to hide her tears, but I saw it. I always saw it. People said it cured everything, but for us time only seemed to make things worse. His absence was a hole that nothing could fill. Money started to run out, bills piled up, and little by little my mother became a shadow of her former self. She tried to get a job but couldn't keep one for long. Some nights I heard her crying in the room, asking God to fix our lives, and then one day he showed up. My mother met him at the neighborhood grocery store. He offered to carry the bags, and according to her he was kind and polite. She always said that life wasn't easy for a single woman and that maybe it was time to move on. At first he seemed perfect. He brought my mother flowers, he gave me compliments, he called me his little one. He said that now we had someone to take care of us. My mother started to smile, knew and me well. I tried to like him, I swear I tried, but there was something about him that made me uncomfortable. I couldn't say exactly what, but when he hugged me I felt like running away. When he talked to me his tone was always sweet, but his eyes made me feel small. I tried to tell my mother this once, but she smiled and said, "You're jealous, my love, he only wants the best for us." From that day on I learned to guard my words. That's how the man who seemed to be the solution to our life became our biggest nightmare. My mother married him a few months later, and the first thing that changed was the house. Before my mother made all the decisions, but now everything went through him. He chose what we were going to eat, where we could go, what we could do. At first it seemed normal. He said he wanted the best for us, but soon I realized that my opinion didn't matter. My mother, who used to be my confidant, was now always by his side. I felt like my house wasn't mine anymore. The little things started to bother me, the way he looked at me for too long, how he would stand in the doorway of my room for no reason, how he called me beautiful in a way that made my skin crawl, and not in a good way. One day my mother left for work and he was alone with me. He called me to sit on the couch with him. My skin crawled. Something inside me screamed that I shouldn't go anywhere. "Lucy, you don't need to be afraid of me," he said, smiling. And that's when I realized I was afraid of him. When you're a child, your home should be the safest place in the world. Home is where you should find comfort, affection, protection. But for me, my own home became my biggest nightmare. And the worst part was that I had nowhere to run. After that day on the couch, I started to notice things that I used to try to ignore. Small details that, when seen alone, could be just coincidences. But together, they painted a truth that I didn't want to accept. My stepfather always found a way to be around. If I was in the kitchen, he would show up. If I went to the bathroom, he would pass by the door. If I went into my room, a few minutes later, he would be there. At first, I thought it was paranoia. Maybe I was exaggerating, like my mother used to say. But the feeling of alertness never went away. Whenever he was around, my skin would get goosebumps. My heart would crawl. I was accelerating and I felt the urge to run. I remember one night in particular. My mother had gone to bed early, tired from work. I stayed in the living room watching TV, trying to enjoy a moment of peace. He sat on the couch on the other side of the room. "It's late, Lucy," he said, without taking his eyes off me. "Your mother is already asleep." I just nodded without saying anything. "Aren't you going to come say good night to me?" I felt a lump in my throat. He was smiling, but something in his expression was disturbing. "Good night," I murmured without moving. His eyes remained fixed on me for a long time. Then he got up and walked to the hallway, but before he disappeared from my sight, he whispered, "Don't forget to lock your bedroom door." My whole body froze. I ran to my room. I closed the door and turned the key. I lay down on the bed, but I remained motionless. I couldn't sleep. I stayed there, staring at the door, waiting for the doorknob to move. For footsteps to appear in the hallway. For the worst to happen. And that night, for the first time, I realized that my own home was the most dangerous place for me. The following days were a game of silent resistance. I avoided being alone with him at all costs. If my mom was at home I would stick to her, if he entered a room I would leave, but whenever he looked at me I knew he was waiting for an opportunity, and little by little he started to make a point of showing that he was the one in charge of that house. "This is not a hotel," he would say when I took too long in the shower. "I am the man of the house, so you have to respect me." If I left something out of place it was a scolding. If I took too long to answer when he called it was a punishment. My mother saw everything but never said anything. She tried to keep the peace as if she was between two worlds, on one side the husband she loved, on the other the daughter who was always with her, but in the end she chose him. That's when I realized I was alone. I knew I needed to tell someone, but who? My mother had already let her. Of course she was going to believe me, and I had no one else until one day my teacher asked to stay a little after class to talk to me. "Lai, is everything okay?" she asked as she closed a book. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I answered, looking at the table. "Are you sure? You've been so quiet lately." It was my chance. My hands were sweating, my heart was beating fast. I didn't like my stepfather," I said almost in a whisper. She frowned. "What do you mean he's mean to you?" "He doesn't treat me well and he scares me." There was silence. She looked at me for a few seconds, then smiled, trying to look like the schoolgirl. "Oh, my dear, stepfathers can be difficult at first, but your mother loves you. I'm sure everything will work out." My chest sank. "But you're a strong girl, Lucy," she said, interrupting. "These things pass." At that moment, I understood. It didn't matter how much I screamed. No one would listen to me. After that, I gave up. I closed myself off in my own world at school. I barely spoke. If someone tried to start a conversation, I would just nod or give short answers. I started walking, looking at the ground, as if I wanted to disappear, but disappearing wasn't an option. And then came the second part of my nightmare. If my home wasn't safe anymore, school would soon become a place of pain. At first, I only suffered from subtle comments. "Look, the weird orphan. Don't come near her, or your father might disappear too. Wow, she eats like a pig. No wonder she's that big." Every word was like a knife in the back. The worst part was that the teachers listened. They knew, but no one did anything. They just looked and pretended not to hear. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase that would soon stop, but it didn't. On the contrary, it got worse. One day, we were in physical education class. I hated this class because I always came last in the team selections. This time, when I was the only one left, one of the boys laughed. "Oh, no, the whale again." Everyone laughed. I looked at the teacher, hoping she would say something, but she just looked away. At that moment, I felt like my existence was a joke to everyone there. And for the first time, I started to think that maybe it would be better if I wasn't there. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. My stepfather became more and more controlling. He watched me all the time at school. I was humiliated every day. I had no friends, no one to defend me. And then one night, as I looked out my bedroom window, I asked myself, would it make a difference if I disappeared? It was the first time that thought crossed my mind. But unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. I didn't know who I was anymore. For a long time, I tried to convince myself that if I became invisible, maybe things would change for the better. They would get better maybe if I didn't bother them. If I curled up and kept quiet, my stepfather would forget about me. Tzg from school they wouldn't notice me. Tz the pain would go away. The pain never went away. It grew day after day like a shadow that followed me wherever I went. What was once a passing fear became a constant terror. I slept little. When I slept I had nightmares always the same. I dreamed that my mother left me behind, that my stepfather laughed while I cried, that the whole school watched me while pointing the finger at me. The worst was waking up and realizing that my nightmare didn't end when I opened my eyes one night when my mother left to work late. My stepfather was alone with me. I knew there was nowhere to run, so I did what I always did. I locked myself in the room and prayed that he would forget me, but that night he didn't forget. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, the sound of socks dragging on the floor. My heart raced. The doorknob moved. I curled up in bed holding the blanket tightly. Lucy, he called with that slurred voice almost like a sus. I remained silent. He turned the doorknob trying to open the door. You heard me. Open it. I held my breath. He pushed the door. The wood creaked. But it didn't open. Do you think a lock can protect you from me? My whole body was shaking. After a while, the footsteps disappeared down the hallway. But I knew that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes. I hadn't slept, but I couldn't miss school. Because if I stayed home, I'd be alone with him, even though I knew what was waiting for me. I'd rather face the hell of school than that man. As soon as I got there, I noticed the looks and the low laughter. I walked down the hallway and heard a group of people limping. She looks like a zombie. Look at her clothes. It looks like she slept in the trash. I swallowed the pain and kept walking, pretending I didn't care. But inside, something inside me broke a little more. Every day in class, the teacher asked us all to do a group project, as always. I was the last one to be chosen. Who wants the whale in the group? One of the boys asked, laughing. The whole class burst out laughing. The teacher heard her. She looked but pretended nothing had happened. It was at that moment that I realized. I had nowhere to run. My house was hell, my school was hell, my life was hell, and I started to wonder, will this ever end? That same day at inter I went to the bathroom to get some air. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, my skin was pale. I didn't look like a child. I looked like a ghost. That's when the door opened loudly. There were 3 girls, the most popular in school. Look who's here. One of them said, crossing her arms. The poor thing. They came closer. My heart raced. Do you think anyone here likes you? Another asked. Do you think anyone feels sorry for you? I remained silent because I'm going to tell you a secret. She leaned close to my face. No one cares about you. The air left my chest. No one misses you. No one cares about you. If you disappeared, no one would notice. I stood there, unable to react. They left laughing, leaving their words echoing in my mind. And for the first time, I thought, maybe they were right. That night, I got home and went straight to my room. I sat on the bed, looking at the window. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted the fear to stop. I wanted to disappear. And then, for the first time, I thought about doing something extreme. Something that should never have crossed my mind. I got up, I went to the window and looked outside, and if I simply stopped existing, my heart was beating fast, my hands were shaking. Maybe it was better this way, maybe it was the only way out. And then I heard a knock on the door. My mother came and she seemed tired, but she looked at me with a worried look. Are you okay, Lucy? I swallowed hard. I wanted to say no, I wanted to scream, I wanted to ask for help, but I just shook my head, just tired. She came closer and ran her hand through my hair. I know things are hard, she said, sighing, but everything will get better. I didn't believe her, but at that moment her touch held me. That night I fell asleep crying, but I was alive, and that day, even without knowing, I had taken the first step towards my salvation. After that night something changed inside me. I still felt fear, I still felt pain, but now I knew one thing: I was alone. No one would come to save me, not my mother, not the school, not the teachers. I could count on anyone, and if no one cared about me, then I didn't need to care either. That's how I started to close myself off even more. So if before I walked with my head down, now I didn't even try to look at others. If before I still made an effort to participate in classes, now I just sat quietly waiting for time to pass. But no matter how much I tried to disappear, people's cruelty always found me. It was on an autumn day that she arrived. I remember it well because it was one of those days when the wind cut through your skin, dry leaves flew across the schoolyard, and students ran into the classrooms, escaping the cold. In my class, the whispers started before class even started. I heard that there's a student today. They say she came from another city. I hope she's pretty, at least. The boys laughed. The girls whispered among themselves. Then the teacher came in, bringing a girl to her side. This is Camilla. She just moved here and will study with you from today. I hope you welcome her. She seemed ordinary. Dark hair, fair skin, brown eyes that avoided me. But there was something about her that caught my attention. The way she held the strap of her backpack tightly. The confident look that hid a certain fear. The shy smile that lasted only a second before disappearing. With that look was the look of those who had suffered during the break. As usual, I sat in the farthest corner of the playground with my lunchbox on my lap. It was then that I heard footsteps approaching. I looked to the side and saw Camilla standing there holding her own lunchbox. "Can I sit here?" she asked. I was surprised. No one ever asked to sit with me. I nodded without saying anything. She sat next to me and was silent for a few seconds, fiddling with her own snack. "I don't like to be in the middle of the playground," she said without looking at me. "Many people." I didn't answer. She sighed and looked at me. "Don't ask where I came from." I shrugged. "No one ever asks where I came from too." She laughed softly, and for the first time in a long time I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't so alone after all. As the days went by, Camilla started to get closer to me. She didn't seem to care about the fact that I was the weird one at school. On the contrary, whenever she could, she would sit with me. She would start a conversation, asking questions, and little by little I started to talk. Not much, just short answers, but for someone who spent years trying to be invisible, that was already a big step. One day while we were sitting in the shade of a tree, she asked, "Why do you always stay alone?" I swallowed hard. "Because it's easier this way." She frowned easily. "What do you mean?" I looked ahead without the courage to face her. "When you're alone, no one can hurt you." There was silence. When I looked to the side, I saw that she was watching me with a sad look. I thought the same thing. I whispered. My chest tightened. I thought she sighed and looked at the sky. "I've also been through some bad things." My heart raced. "Someone like me?" For a second I wanted to ask, I wanted to know, but I couldn't. Camilla noticed my hesitation and smiled. "But I discovered that being alone doesn't solve anything. It only makes everything worse." I remained silent, absorbing her words, and for the first time I asked myself, could I have been wrong all this time? The friendship between Camilla and me began to grow, and of course people began to notice. The circles began. "Look there, the weird one got a friend. I bet the newbie also has some problem." I was already used to it, but Camilla didn't, and it was on one of those days that something happened. We were in physical education class. As always, I was the last to be chosen, but this time, before anyone could say anything, Camilla took my hand and said, "If she's not on the team, I'm not going either." Silence. The students looked at each other confused. What did one of the boys say? "Are you going to refuse to play just because of her?" She crossed her arms. "Yes." The teacher looked at Camilla, not knowing what to do. "That's not fair," she said firmly. "You do this to lose every day, and the teachers pretend not to come." My heart was beating fast. No one had ever done this for me. No one had ever been by my side. In the end, the teacher gave in, and that day, for the first time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be treated with respect. Having a friend changed something inside me. For years, I got used to being invisible, accepting that I would never have someone by my side. But Camilla appeared and, little by little, she began to show me that the world didn't have to be so lonely. But even with her friendship, my fear still existed. My stepfather was still at home. My schoolmates still despised me. Deep down, I thought that nothing would really change until the day I was forced to choose between continuing to hide or finally reacting. It was a Friday and my mother was going out that night for a work dinner. That meant I would be alone with him. I knew he had been waiting for this moment since early on. I noticed that his gaze was different. He watched me more intensely, like a predator waiting for the right moment to attack. After my mother left, I went straight to my room and locked the door. But after a few minutes, I heard his voice on the other side. "Lucy, come here." I stood still. "I know you're awake." My heart was beating fast. "Come here. I just want to talk." I felt my whole body tremble. The doorknob turned. He tried to open the door. "Are you going to kill me?" Disobey. My mind screamed for me to do something, anything, but I was paralyzed. Open now. The silence on the other side of the door made me hold my breath. He was still there. Then I heard his footsteps moving away. I sat there on the floor shaking, knowing that it wasn't over, and that's when I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to do something. The next day at school I looked for Camilla. I wanted to tell her, but the words wouldn't come out. How to explain something that I myself couldn't understand? But Camilla noticed. "You're different today," she said. "Swallow it. I'm just tired." She frowned. "Lucy, you know you can talk to me, right?" I tried to smile, but I was tired of talking and no one heard me, and that's when Camilla did something that changed everything. She held my hand and said, "I believe in you." It was just 3 words, but at that moment they meant everything to me, because no one had ever said that before. No one had ever believed in me, and that's when I understood if I wanted things to change, I would have to fight for myself. That same day as I was leaving school, something unexpected happened. The same boys who always humiliated me were at the gate. "Look there, the fat girl was again." They laughed, but for the first time, instead of lowering my head and not hearing her, I stopped. I turned around slowly and repeated. My voice came out firmer than I expected. The boys looked at each other in surprise. "What's wrong? Are you going to cry?" I felt Camilla by my side, watching me. And then for the first time I didn't run away. "Do you think you're hurting me?" I asked. Do you think I care? They remained silent. I feel sorry for you, I continued. Because only weak people need to hurt others to feel better. The laughter disappeared for the first time. The boys didn't have an answer. I walked away, my heart racing. My hands were shaking. But for the first time in my life I felt strong. Camilla smiled by my side. You were incredible, she said. And at that moment I realized something. I was still afraid. I still had scars. I still felt pain. But I was no longer the same girl who hid. I was changing. And that was my first victory. I knew that one day this would have to happen. I could no longer pretend that I could keep living like this. Ever since that night when my stepfather tried to open my bedroom door, I felt like time was running out. Against me sooner or later he would try again and I could no longer wait for the worst. But what could I do if my mother didn't listen to me, if the teachers pretended they did, etc., if my schoolmates only knew how to hurt me? So who could save me? That morning I arrived at school feeling like I was carrying a ton on my back. The fear never left me. My stepfather's face is on my mind all the time, his look, the way he imposed himself as if he knew I would never have given in, and what he told me the last time we spoke, I believe Palace F echoing inside me, and that was why before class started I looked for her. She was sitting in the hallway leafing through a book. When she saw me she smiled, but when she looked at me her smile disappeared. What happened? She asked immediately. I swallowed hard. I wanted to say, I wanted to tell her everything, but how could I explain a pain that seemed greater than words could describe? She waited, she didn't insist, and then without thinking much I sat down next to her and whispered, I can't go back home anymore. Her eyes widened. What if I go back? Something bad will happen. She was silent but held my hand, and I knew in that moment that she would listen to me, that for the first time someone would really listen to me. Camilla was silent for a moment, but her look said it all. She understood. You need to tell someone, she said, her voice full of urgency. But for those who my mother doesn't listen, the teachers don't care, no one cares. I do care. I was speechless then. Before I could react she stood up and said, come with me. I froze. Where are we going? To talk to the school counselor? My stomach sank. No, I can't. Lucy, do you want to keep living like this? The question hung in the air, and for the first time I really thought about it. I wanted to keep living like this, and for the first time the answer was no. I went with Camilla to the counselor's office. He was a middle-aged man, bald, with big glasses and a serious expression. When we entered he looked at us over the top of his glasses. What is it? Camilla squeezed my hand encouraging me. Lucy, do you need help? He frowned. Help with what? My throat dried up. Camilla looked at me waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath, and then for the first time in my life I let the words come out. My stepdad was all I could say before bursting into tears. Camilla hugged me, and for the first time I cried in front of someone without feeling ashamed. The counselor was silent for a moment, but then his voice came firm. Tell me everything. And so I told him, this time without hiding, this time without fear. The counselor listened carefully without interrupting me. When I finished he sighed and picked up the phone. Lucy, from today on you will no longer be alone. I didn't understand at the time, but then he dialed a number and started talking. Yes, we have a case here. A student reported psychological abuse and threats at home. My heart raced. I knew what was happening. He was calling the police and the juvenile court. At the end of the day my mother was called to school. She arrived in a hurry, confused, wanting to know why they had called her at work. But when she entered the room and saw my face, something changed in her look. She realized that this time she could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. The counselor explained the situation, told her everything. I said my mother was shocked. Lucy, that's true. I just felt her feeling a lump in her throat. Her face went white for a moment. I thought she was going to deny everything as she always did, but this time she didn't deny it. This time she listened, and for the first time I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. When we got back home, the atmosphere was heavy. My stepfather was in the living room as if nothing had happened. My mother came in and he looked at her with a smile. What was it? He asked as if he didn't know. But then my mother looked at him with a look I had never seen before. A look of fury, disgust, and hatred. She didn't say anything. She just picked up the phone and called someone. Come now. In less than an hour, the police were at our house. He tried to argue. He tried to pretend he was innocent, but my mother, who always defended him before, no longer believed his lies. And that's how he was expelled from our lives forever. My stepfather's arrest didn't erase everything he put me through on the day he was taken. I remember standing at the door of my house watching the police put him in the car. He turned around one last time and gave me a look that made me tremble from head to toe. Even behind bars, the fear he planted inside me was still there. And I knew he wasn't the only ghost I would have. I had to face it, because now that he was gone a new challenge was appearing before me to relearn how to live after everything happened. My house felt strange. The silence was different. It was no longer a silence of fear but of emptiness, as if something was still there hidden in the shadows. My mother seemed like another person. She cried every night, pacing the house, mumbling to herself. One day I heard her saying softly how I was so blind. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say that I tried to talk. I Tried to scream, I tried to show the truth, but I said nothing because deep down I knew that my mother was also a victim. She blamed herself for not having seen what was happening right before her eyes, but unlike her I could not afford to stay stuck in the past. I needed to move forward. On the first night without him at home, I closed the door to my room and stared at the window. No shadows appeared in the hallway, no whispers came from the other side of the door, no threats haunted my mind. For the first time in years I could sleep without holding the blanket tightly, without curling up in bed, without jumping at the slightest noise. But peace did not come all at once. The nightmares still haunted me at night. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like he was there, but when I looked around I realized that no one was there. It was just me, and for the first time that didn't scare me. I thought that after everything, at least at school, things would get better, but I was wrong. The rumors spread quickly. Some said that my stepfather was arrested because he was a dangerous criminal. Others invented that my mother cheated on him and that he left because of that. But the worst wasn't the gossip, the worst were the looks. Before, people despised me, now they looked at me with pity. I hated that I didn't want to be the fragile girl, the poor thing. I just wanted to be me. It was then that I realized that school wasn't a safe place for me, and if I wanted to change my life I would need to find another way. A few days later, Camilla and I were sitting in the courtyard. She was as direct as ever. "What are you going to do now?" I frowned. "How come your life has changed?" "Lie, you don't have to live in fear anymore." "But what are you going to do with this freedom?" I remained silent. I had never thought about that. I spent so much time surviving, trying to escape the worst, that I never imagined that one day I would have a choice about what to do with my life. Camilla smiled. "You can be anything." It was the first time I heard those words, and it was at that moment that an idea began to emerge within me. Maybe my story could serve for something bigger. Maybe I could help other people who went through what I went through. With the help of the school principal, I started seeing a social worker. She helped me understand something I had never realized before. I was not to blame for what happened to me. I spent years thinking the problem was me, that I was weak, that I deserved all of that. But for the first time someone told me in no uncertain terms, "You are a survivor, Lucy." It was strange to hear that, but it was liberating. Little by little I started to talk more. I started to get that pain out of me, and over time I realized that every time I spoke, a piece of that weight was lifted from my shoulders. Months later, the social worker invited me to an event about violence against children and adolescents. She asked if I wanted to tell my story to other girls. My first instinct was to refuse, but then I remembered what Camilla said, "You can be anything." I took a deep breath and accepted. On the day of the event, I went up on the small stage and looked at the audience. There were dozens of faces there. Many of them were of girls like me. I knew that some of them were going through what I went through, and so for the first time I told my story. I spoke of the fear, of the pain, of loneliness, of the moment when I thought there was no way out, and of the day when everything changed. And when I finished, the silence took over the place, but then a girl in the back of the audience started to cry. She ran up to me and hugged me and whispered, "Thank you, you gave me hope." And in that moment I knew that my pain had not been in vain. Telling my story for the first time was like opening a door that I didn't even know existed. For years I carried my pain like an unbearable weight, a burden that crushed me every day. But at that event, when that girl hugged me and thanked me, I realized something. My story was not just mine. There were so many other girls, so many other boys going through what I went through, and if I could help them, if I could be the AZ that I never had, if I could stop other children from feeling as alone as I felt that day, I made a decision. I would never be silent again. If my story had power, then I would use it to change the world. I was a teenager, but I knew I wanted to do something bigger. I talked to the social worker who helped me and asked what I could do to support children who suffered like I did. She smiled and said, "You're already doing that, Lucy. Just by telling your story, you're already changing lives." But I wanted more. That's how I started to participate in meetings for young victims of abuse and violence. I heard stories as heavy as mine, some even worse. But for the first time, I didn't feel weak. I felt useful. Every time I held someone's hand and said, "I know how you feel," I saw in that person's eyes the same relief I felt when Camilla told me, "I believe in you." As time went by, my mother began to change too. She still carried the guilt and cried some nights, thinking she had spoken to me, but little by little, she began to understand that she was also a victim of the situation. She began to seek psychological help and get involved in support groups for women who have lived through abusive relationships. And one day, after a long time, she looked me in the eyes and said, "Forgive me, daughter." It was the first time I heard that from her, and for the first time I knew that I could forgive her. True, because I saw that she was also trying to rebuild herself, and just like me, she was succeeding. Years later, when I was already a young adult, I received a letter. It was from a girl who, from one of the events where I told my story. In the letter she wrote, "I was about to give up on everything, but when I heard you speak, I realized that I was not alone. You saved me, Lucy." I remember holding that letter with my hands shaking, because at that moment I realized that I was no longer the victim of the story. I was the protector. I was the one who gave, and for the first time I felt completely free. The letter from that girl stayed with me for a long time. I read it and reread it, trying to absorb the weight of those words. "You saved me, Lu." For so long I felt that my pain was useless, that all the suffering I experienced only served to destroy me. But at that moment I realized that every tear, every sleepless night, every fear I faced, all of this brought me here, and now I had a purpose. I didn't just want To tell my story, I wanted to change lives. I never thought about pursuing an academic career. After everything I went through, I thought I wouldn't have a real future, but one day while talking to the social worker who helped me, she said something that stayed in my mind. "You've saved me, Lu." I thought about studying to work with children and teenagers. I remained silent. I had never thought about it. "You have a gift, Lucy," she continued. "People connect with you because they see the truth in what you say. You can go further, you can make it your mission." That night lying in bed, I thought about it, and for the first time I dreamed about the future. I decided I wanted to study social psychology so I could officially help abused children. The problem, I wasn't the best student. My years of suffering at school made me completely distance myself from studies, but now for the first time I wanted to learn. I started studying with Camilla, who was always a brilliant student, and little by little I was making up for lost time. At first it was difficult, but every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that letter. "You saved me," and I kept going. Years later, when I finished my studies, I got an internship at a support center for victims of violence. The first time I sat in front of a girl who had been through what I had been through, I felt a lump in my throat. She was small. She must have been about 12. Her eyes were deep set, her shoulders hunched, the expression of someone who was already carrying a weight too big for her age. When the psychologist in charge introduced me to the girl, barely looked at me. "She doesn't talk much," the psychologist warned me. I took a deep breath and sat down next to her. I remained silent for a few minutes and then softly said, "I know, just like you." The girl frowned in surprise and for the first time raised her eyes to look at me. And I knew at that moment that I was exactly where I should be. I worked for years helping children and teenagers who had gone through traumas similar to mine. Each story reminded me of a piece of my own pain, but at the same time, each child I helped made me see that my pain was never in vain. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to create something big, something that could reach more people. That's when the idea came to me. What if I created a support group not only for children but also for mothers? For families who had gone through difficult situations like mine. So I started working on it. Shortly after, my first victim support organization was born. The first case we helped was that of a girl named Sophia. She was 11 years old and suffered violence at home, just like I had. When she came to us, she was scared, insecure, and hopeless. But something inside me told her that, with time, she would be able to heal. She attended the meetings. Silent for weeks, but one day while everyone was sharing their stories, she raised her hand and for the first time spoke. She cried and we held her, and in that moment I knew the cycle was breaking, that finally my pain was being transformed into something bigger. I never imagined I would come this far. When I was a child, all I wanted was to survive. Now I didn't just survive, I changed lives. My organization started small, just a few meetings with victims and families, but the need was too great to ignore. Every week more people sought our help, more children needed a safe place, more mothers wanted to understand how to protect their children, and that's how my small initiative began to grow and gain strength. One day a journalist heard about our work and wanted to do a story about us. I hesitated. The idea of telling my story to an even larger audience scared me, but then I remembered the first time I shared my pain and how it changed my life and saved others, so I accepted the interview. It was published in a local newspaper, and to my surprise we received a flood of messages, parents asking for help, teachers wanting to learn how to deal with traumatized children, survivors looking for a space to share your stories. My story was echoing, and that was just the beginning. But like everything in life, not everything is easy. Many people said that domestic violence was a family problem, not a society problem. They said that children had to learn and move on. I knew it wasn't that simple. I saw the trauma in the victim's eyes. I knew the weight of living with invisible scars. So I started giving talks at schools, businesses, churches, anywhere they would let me speak. I wanted the world to understand that a child's pain cannot be ignored. Little by little, people started listening. 3 years after I started my project, something happened that I will never forget. I was at the support center when a young woman walked through the door. At first, I didn't recognize her. She seemed strong and confident. But then I saw her eyes and realized that it was the girl in the letter. The one who had written years before. "You saved me, Lucy." She smiled at me and said, "Now I want other girls too." And at that moment, I understood that my purpose was multiplying. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. All the children who once thought they had no hope and now had a chance to start over. After everything I've been through, I realized something. Pain doesn't have to define who we are. For many years, I thought that my destiny was already set, but I was wrong, because there is always a way out. And if you are listening to my story now and feel like there is no hope, I want you to know you are not alone. You are stronger than you think and you can win too. I am Lucy, and this was the story of how I turned the game around. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel and like the video to help our community, and tell me in the comments what you thought of my life story. Also enjoy and tell me your journey. Until later. And tell me your journey until later. And tell me your journey until later. And tell me your journey until later.